Hello, and welcome to Episode 9, No Stone Left Unturned. Today, we'll take a look at some new evidence in James's case, and take a look at the prosecutor that was so bent on prosecuting him. If you would like to support James, he does have a GoFundMe. If you look at No Stone Left Unturned podcast or just search James Griffin GoFundMe, you can help his legal expenses and help him generate a little bit more of a presence on Facebook, Instagram, and get his story heard. First, we're going to look at a letter sent to Miss Griffin from Demetrius in 2013. It has been signed, dated, and notarized, and is true as far as we can tell. Laura, hello, how are you doing? I am writing this letter and statement to clear my conscience for not testifying truthfully at James's trial in the Carlos O'Kelly's case. It all started when I was incarcerated in the Johnson County Jail in Olathe, Kansas. Two detectives from Topeka came to visit me and were asking questions about James and a robbery he supposedly committed or had something to do with. I told them I didn't know anything because I really didn't. James and I have never talked about anything even related to a robbery concerning him. I've known James my whole life, and I've never even seen him with a handgun or pistol of any type. I know that I testified that I saw James with a gun, and I asked him to sell it to me because I was having some problems in Kansas City with some guys, and he told me that I didn't want that gun because Maurice had shot someone with it. Everyone I have ever known can tell you that I was lying because everyone knows that I hate guns. I have never owned one and refuse to be around them at any time in any place. The only reason I even had any knowledge of a gun was because the detectives were questioning me about it when they interviewed me in the Johnson County Jail. My bond was $100,000, and I had a bond hearing coming up, so I told them I might know something about a gun, but why should I help them? And if their prosecutor would be willing to put a good word in for the Johnson County prosecutor to grant me a signature bond at my bond hearing, then I wouldn't have any problem talking. So they left and came back another day and said, okay, depending on what I had to say, it would be a go. I basically put bits and pieces of what they had told me together because I didn't know anything else. They asked me if I know anything about Maurice and any robberies, James and any robberies, James's car, and if I had seen any handguns at James's house. So I made a statement out of the information that they provided. And at my bond hearing, the Johnson County prosecutor spoke up and explained to the judge about my cooperation in the Topeka case and recommended a signature bond. So the judge granted it. I had no intention on actually testifying. I'm smart enough to throw a statement together for information given to me, but not stupid enough to testify to it knowing it's a lie. Unless I absolutely had no choice, and that is exactly what happened. I tried to lay low and not be found, but somehow the Jackson County prosecutor got my phone number and kept calling me. I finally answered one morning and told him I wasn't going to Topeka and I wasn't testifying at any trial. He told me I didn't have any choice. He had subpoenas for me and Melissa, and he will be delivering them himself the next morning. Well, he came the next morning and knocked on the front door of my apartment building, but couldn't get in because it had been locked entry. I guess he got pretty pissed off because the next morning he came back and he woke up to 5 guys dressed in black Special Task Force gear, pointing guns at us, yelling, "Let me see your hands." I asked them, what are you guys doing in my house? And you don't have a warrant. And even if you did, you can't just pick the lock on my apartment door and just walk in and hold me at gunpoint. One of them stated, yeah, we can do that when you don't have to answer the door for the prosecutor. Then the Jackson County prosecutor enters the apartment and bitches a little about me not answering the door the day before and serves us with subpoenas. I told him then and there that neither one of us knew anything about the case, and I lied to the detectives just to get out of jail. He told me that wasn't his problem and that he told the Topeka prosecutor that he would serve us the papers and make sure that we made it to the trial. So Melissa told him she wasn't going because she doesn't know anything. And I told him I wasn't going because I don't want to get on the stand and tell a lie. Then he threatens us by saying, if you do not show up for the trial, we will come back with warrants for your arrest and you will be transported to the county jail in Topeka and held until the next trial date, which will probably be in about 6 months, and found in contempt of court and given another 6 months. Then he told me, after I served that year in Topeka County Jail, that they would have my Johnson County signature bond pulled, but it probably wouldn't matter after serving a year in Topeka County. I would have missed any court dates in Johnson County anyway, so my bond would already be forfeited. Then they left. I went to the apartment manager and asked why they let them in, and she told me she didn't. She heard someone messing with the entry door and looked over at her door and saw them walking in after they picked the lock as well. After this little encounter, I was afraid to go back to jail. So the day of the trial, I left Melissa at home and drove to Topeka for court. But that wasn't good enough. When they saw Melissa didn't come with me, the prosecutor called the Kansas City prosecutor, and he sent 2 of the 5 guys who were with him that day. He came to my apartment, back to the apartment, and they picked both the entry door lock and my apartment door lock, and again went in, got Melissa out of bed, and put her in their car and drove her across the state line halfway to Topeka to a truck stop, where they met with the detectives from Topeka, who then drove Melissa to the trial in Topeka. So basically, we were threatened and forced to testify. I testified to what they wanted me to back then because I was afraid to go back to jail. And I know, because of this letter and statement, trouble is going to come my way from the prosecutors, from both states, but that's okay. I'm not afraid of jail anymore. Besides, right is right, and fair is fair. I have to do what is right now, and tell the truth. I apologize to you and James for testifying falsely. I have also talked with everyone else who testified individually at different times, and was shocked to find out that every one of them also lied or exaggerated testimony, because they were all after the same thing, the reward money, and not one of them was ashamed to admit it. But anyway, that's how it all went down. I felt I needed to come clean and give an explanation as to why I lied. I hope someday you and James can forgive me. So if we believe Demetrius, he sat on that stand, as we pretty much already knew, and pieced together what the police told him to say. He's not proud of it. He didn't do it for any vindictive reason, but he did it to save his own skin, to get off on bail, get a bond, and wait for the next trouble to find him. Unfortunately, that trouble went to James. James has been sitting in jail for too long now for a crime he did not commit, a crime he could not even possibly be present for, and a crime that, although terrible, he has no responsibility for. Now, if we are to believe that Demetrius is telling the truth and he is being completely honest about knowing nothing about the crime, well, this statement becomes a little more interesting. July 20th, 2021. I, Rasha Boyd Hadley. On January 23rd, 2002, James Griffin came into Independence around 7:30 p.m. We spent time with our daughter, Kiana Hadley. We, around 9 p.m., went and got a room at the Townsend Inn. Stayed there until 8:30 a.m. on January 24th. We left the motel and went to my grandmother, Catherine's house at 725 redacted around 11 a.m. here in Independence, Kansas. While James stayed with our child, I took his car to run a few stops around 11:30 a.m. After I washed his black Mazda 626 and returned back to the house, James was waiting with our child. We stayed at my grandmother's house until around 4:30 p.m. James left, going to his mother Mary Griffin's house in Coffeyville, Kansas. The reason that I know that James was here on January 23rd, I remember because we had family down from Topeka for a family gathering on January 23rd. And when my family returned back in Topeka, Kansas, they called and told us that there was a robbery at a restaurant, and it was believed to be James and his brother Maurice Franklin. It would be impossible for them to be in two places at once. The time and distance of around 2.5 hours is the drive. Again, if we know the statements made against James are false, and we know he wasn't even in Topeka at the time, how could he have possibly been the driver in this crime? Finally, we're going to take a look at some news out of Topeka, Kansas, which is where this case originated, and we take a look at the prosecutor's behavior. What is Topeka known for in terms of justice? Well, if we look at Shawnee County, for instance, we have Kansas Supreme Court disbars former Shawnee County prosecutor for unethical conduct. She violated the profession ethics in Chandler murder trial and is on a disciplinary case. She also stepped down a couple of years ago over no one's really sure. The Supreme Court, in a 101-page disciplinary opinion Friday, disbarred former Shawnee County prosecutor Jackie Spradling for a pattern of unethical conduct resulting in significant prejudice against the accused. It was the most stringent punishment available to the Supreme Court and followed a unanimous recommendation of a 3-attorney panel that heard evidence of Spradling's penchant for making false statements in court. The justices found Spradling violated more than half a dozen Kansas rules of professional conduct. The evidence in this case demonstrates a serious pattern of grossly unethical misconduct. The Supreme Court majority said that the decision, after carefully considering the findings, conclusions, recommendations, and the American Bar Association standards for imposing lawyer sanctions, we find that the respondents' intolerable acts of deception warrant the severe sanction of disbarment. In addition, the court mandated the Office of Judicial Administration strike the name of Jacqueline Spradling from the roll of attorneys listed to practice law in Kansas. Her disbarment was to coincide with publication of Friday's decision. Spradling came under scrutiny after winning convictions against Dana Chandler in a double homicide case in Shawnee County, and later for her work in Jackson County sexual assault case involving defendant Jacob Ewing. In both instances, the convictions were overturned on appeal. The Kansas Board of Discipline and Attorneys panel of lawyers recommend disbarment for Spradling after concluding she knowingly and intentionally engaged in deliberate misconduct to win convictions. In a highly unusual maneuver, the state's disciplinary administrator independently urged the Supreme Court to reject the hearings panel's conclusion and impose a lesser punishment of indefinite suspension. Why would you not want this person disbarred? She has ruined countless lives just to win a case. And if you look at Demetrius' statement, is it really that far-fetched to think he was made to testify? He even says in the court statements, in the trial transcripts, I'm only here because the prosecutor made me. I'm only here to make sure my wife doesn't get in trouble. I'm only here to say what they want me to say. Well, He did, and James suffered for it. If you'd like to help James, please go to his GoFundMe, James Griffin, help with some legal expenses, and please stay involved with his case, Justice for James Griffin on Facebook, Instagram, and maybe TikTok one day. I'm your host, Matt Muller, and I hope to see you soon.